Hello, good afternoon, everyone. And of course, for those who are watching us on a different time zone, especially the person I'm inviting today, good evening and good morning to others from other time zones. So, my name is Marilyn. I'm the founder and CEO of Customized Training Solutions Private Limited, or CTS, Asia's most trusted training and business solutions partner, and we have been creating events and programs that adds value and impact for leaders to stay relevant, adapt to the next normal, and ensure performance of a hybrid team. And our mission is to inspire sustainable transformation by empowering leaders through customized learning solutions that drive outcomes and impact. We have served over 4,500 leaders from over 30 countries in different industries, including Petronas, Sony Mobile, Ayala Group, Meralco, Aboitiz Power, Seda Hotels, and more. And today, it's my great pleasure to introduce Jamie Getgood. He's a globally awarded or he got so much awards HR leaders with 20 plus years of experience. He worked in and with multiple countries like Australia, USA, Philippines, and Thailand. And he's also awarded Australian Leader of the Year um, at HRO Today's HR Superstar, Australian Business Journals, Australian Leadership Experts to Watch, to name a few. See, I told you he has a lot of awards. So, without so much further ado, I'd like to invite and bring in Jamie. Hi, Jamie.
Hi, Marilyn. How are you?
I'm great. Thank you for asking. And I really appreciate you taking time to have this conversation with me today.
Absolutely, my pleasure. I've been looking forward to this.
Yeah, I've been actually looking forward as well, and I really rushed. I mentioned to you before we started, I actually came from Oslo, in Cebu, where I did some shark watching, and it was an amazing experience. And I'm really glad I'm here on time, and we're here. And so I look forward to our conversation. To start with, I mean, you have over 20 years of experience, and you have a very interesting story that you've shared with me, which I did not share yet. So I would like to invite you to share your story or add more, to introduce yourself better and and give justice to what you have already done,
No
especially in the
worries.
space of leadership.
Not a problem. And look, um, yes, I may have won some awards, but I think it's because of my last name. So with a last name like Get Good, it's really hard not to continue to improve yourself every day. So um,
Wow.
it's a reminder of who I need to be. Um, so my background, I have been in HR for a long time.
Mhm.
I've worked with a lot of multinationals. I actually started my career not in HR. I started as a mechanical tradesperson, working in a manufacturing
Mhm.
plant, uh,
Mhm.
basically in maintenance, fixing machinery.
Mhm.
And long story short, that was a company called Electrolux, and
Mhm.
fairly big company. And they saw some opportunities for me to then train apprentices. And then from there, they saw some behaviors in me that they thought would make a good HR person. And that was,
Mhm.
20 something years ago. And they gave me opportunities that most people don't get.
Mhm.
And here I am today in HR, thanks to that start. But uh, probably the crux of my career that everyone wants to talk about is my work at General Motors in Australia. And I've done many amazing things in my career that I think would be able to really help other young HR people learn. But with General Motors, it was a very interesting scenario because we were a business that wasn't quite performing at the time. We
Mhm.
were a bottom quartile performer in Australia compared to all of the General Motors plants around the world, and there was about 170 factories that they owned at that point, and we were in the bottom quartile. So when I joined, I realized very quickly the culture wasn't good. I
Mhm.
realized that the way we were leading people had some challenges and because of that, obviously our business performance wasn't good either. So I really got confronted by a leader in my very first week and got almost threatened and abused, which was not a good start to my HR leadership at General
Mhm.
Motors. But to General Motors' credit, that there were individuals that were not necessarily towing the General Motors line. So, um, but when I joined, I really challenged various leaders that were in my world, and we really thought, well, if we're going to change our culture and be different, what do we do? And I had some really supportive leaders that were willing to do that. Unfortunately, for some, we did have to exit some leaders because they weren't
Mhm.
going to be culture focused or people focused. And then we did a number of initiatives to change the way we led. And long story short, that then
Mhm.
led to us moving from being a bottom quartile manufacturer to in the top 10 car plants in General Motors.
Wow.
And
That's amazing. And I'm really glad you started with your story, because that's very interesting, because from being a technical person you've actually moved to HR. And I think I've been hearing quite a number of people who have been doing that. And again, HR is, I would say, is one of the most challenging department, because you really have to deal with people, and a lot of leaders actually like fail because they don't know how to deal with people. And again, that goes back to your story of, as you mentioned, where you've actually helped turn around General Motors during your time from being in the bottom quartile performer to the number one GM facility in the world, and that's like amazing. So it's getting good, but you should have like a last name of getting greater, right?
yeah,
Other
I
than
look,
just good.
we actually, if I go back to Electrolux when I was working as a maintenance guy, we had a guy there called Billy Goodenough. So he was already there.
So you are still getting good.
I'm still trying to get good.
So yeah, and so there's always like room for making it better, or and
Absolutely.
better.
And
Thank you.
and
Thank
maybe
you. Mhm.
and maybe just to sort of wrap up that story and why I got
Mhm.
the awards. Yes, we
Mhm.
were now a high performer, but we ended up
Mhm.
having the economic factors in Australia that meant
Mhm.
that automotive manufacturing was going to close. So
Mhm.
Ford and Toyota and General Motors announced closure, and the
Mhm.
whole industry was closing, and about 100,000 people were going to be losing their jobs because of this decision.
Wow,
So
that's
I
a lot.
then, in addition to having got this culture to where it was, um, we basically now had to help transition people out over a 4 year period, and
Mhm.
we took that same people focused leadership approach. We
Mhm.
encouraged, we built a transition program that was world class, and I don't think anything
Mhm.
like it anywhere in the world. Um,
Mhm.
and long story short, at the end of that program, we were still number one car plant in the world for quality and other metrics, despite significant
Mhm.
change and a closure. And what happened as a result of that was 86% of our workforce transitioned to completely new industries and new jobs. And it's metrics that pretty much the HR world hasn't seen. And I'm
Mhm.
really proud of that. It was because of great leadership. It was, not just me and my HR team and great leaders within General Motors and the great support. Um, we also had such a good program that we supported the Australian government and South Australian government with their programs,
Mhm.
and they also had levels of success, and because of that I won Australian Leader of the Year and some of those awards you mentioned. So um, it was a really interesting journey that got me um, it allowed me to see the fruits of leading people well despite the challenges you might be facing.
Yeah, I really appreciate you highlighting that and wrapping up the story that you've shared. And again, that goes back to what you've said, how important culture is. And without you learning, without you leading the team, it's gonna be really difficult, right? And that's again, like what you've said, is the foundation to the success of any organization. It's really like about leadership, learning continuously, and of course building that culture to create like what we actually call success, right? So thank you so much for that. And before I ask you the next question, I just wanted to acknowledge Bless. Hello to my two favorite people in the world. Thank you so much, Bless, for introducing us. And that's how I get to know Jamie, by the way, for the knowledge of our audience. And yes, getting
Blessings
greater.
amazing.
Yeah, so thank you, Bless, for introducing us. Without you, we're not both here today. So thank you so much for the introduction. And so, and before I ask my question, I just wanted to invite those who are watching us live to join us in this conversation. Ask your question. Let us know what your takeaways are, and again, join us in this conversation. So my question is, who are your influencers? What is your favorite leadership styles that leads you to how you actually define what leadership is for you?
Yeah, I've thought about this a number of times, and it's really hard to pinpoint one person
Mm-hmm.
because there's different styles and different types of leaders out there. But I always seem to come back to the same type of leader. And for example, um, there's a there's a guy you might have heard of called Simon Sinek,
Mm-hmm.
right? And he brings out some really good principles about starting with why, getting people to understand why
Sure.
you do things. And then he brought out a book called Leaders Eat Last. And when you hear some of his messages on YouTube and on LinkedIn, you start realizing that there's something about this people focused leadership. And
Mm-hmm.
I'd like to think that I've always done that in my career before I even had listened to Simon Sinek. But I
Mm-hmm.
think it's that type of leadership that I've really considered important. I truly believe if an employee feels valued and feels like they add value, if an employee understands that their leaders got their back and builds psychological safety and makes them feel like that they have a part to play in the organization,
Mm-hmm.
they are going to perform. And I think that people focused leadership is super important.
Mm-hmm.
And then I look at other examples that I really look up to, and I'm a mad football, or it depends on what country you're in, soccer
Mm-hmm.
supporter. And there's a manager of my favorite team, Liverpool, whose name's Jurgen Klopp, and he's a different leader because he's obviously coaching a football team, but he's very much a people focused leader, and he's created this family, this camaraderie in the team, which has made us better. But he's also a very tough leader, and
Mm-hmm.
he's very he will set direct targets. He'll make people accountable with how they lead and how they represent themselves and how they behave. But at the same time, he's very warm and engaging and fatherly. And I think, it's a very different context to look at a sporting coach in the business world, but I think there's some principles we can learn. And then I guess the final couple of people, Jordan Peterson, he's
Mm-hmm.
incredible psychologist with great views. And then my penultimate leader is a man that might people know as Jesus. And again, if you look at how he represented himself, and you know was the ultimate sacrificial leader, but if you look past all of that and how he led um, when he was alive, and what he stood for, he made a difference to the world, not just to the people around him. And I think, without going too deep on that particular topic, I think there's a lot to learn there as well.
Wow, thank you for sharing that with us. And I mean, I've been following Simon Sinek as well, and you've shared Jordan Peter. And the reason why you look up to them is because of their leadership styles and leadership journey as well that they share to the public and making a difference to people. And I really love like when you shared about being a leader who is very people focused or people centric, right? Because that makes them feel valued. That makes them um, feel that they belong in the organization, and therefore actually there's always an ROI to that, right? Or because they perform well, right? So
I,
I really
I can give you a real live example. When I
please.
was at General Motors, part of
Mhm.
the transformation was getting our leaders to become people focused and talk to their teams every single day. And I made them put in their calendar 30 minutes a day, they must go and walk the floor and not talk about work, and
Mhm.
just get to know your people, understand their wives' names, their dogs' names, their favorite football team. Just get to know them, and you'll start learning more about them and their challenges, but also their passions. And
Mhm.
and we had one particular success story where we had a gentleman who was really struggling with things in life, and wasn't talking to anyone. And
Mhm.
because we now had this people focused approach, he had trust in his leader and felt that he could open up. And he
Mhm.
wasn't performing well as an individual. But once we got to know him and understood his personal challenges, we did a couple of small things to help him out in his personal environment. And all of a sudden, he went from a bottom employee to one of our best employees. And it was all because we cared, we got to know him, we understood his passions, and we allowed him to show value to us.
That's an amazing story. And again, that sounds so simple, but again, like a lot of people or organizations seems to struggle on that part, right? Being people centric, or even whether it's customer internal or external. Sometimes they forget, like, and it's interesting when it comes to leadership. It's really so much about people, right? And like just making them feel like what you've said, the same way as you did with your colleagues or your team members, is that to make them feel that they belong, that they are heard, that they're important, and they're part of, again, the why of the organization as
Yeah,
well, right? So I
absolutely.
really appreciate that reminder, because I think it sounds simple, and yet again, as I mentioned, quite a number of organizations or people kind of like seem to forget a lot about it, right? So that leads me to my next question. From your experience in the corporate world, working with corporate leaders, or as a corporate leader as well, now you're working with corporate leaders as well, right? So what would you say will be their top three problems that they normally face?
Yeah, look, I think it depends on what industry. So I work in multiple industries, and
Mhm.
um, I think the common thread I'm seeing everywhere right now is how do they retain or recruit, retain the right talent. And I know in various industries, we do a lot of work in healthcare in the US, and the hospitals are really struggling with this, especially with a shortage of nurses and so forth. So that is definitely one. Another challenge would be, and maybe I'll come back to that again in a moment. But the other challenge that I see is rapid technological changes that we're seeing right now, as well as leadership. So I would say they're my three. Um, so retaining and recruiting, retaining talent, leadership, and rapid changes. Um, if you look at those three things and don't do those three things right, it really
Mhm.
impacts your business. And and just going back over those from a recruitment and retainment. If you don't have the right recruitment practices, you don't get the right people in the first place. And then how you onboard them is crucial, and how you engage them into culture is important. Um, then retaining them is all about culture and their value in the business, and how they can make a difference. And I think sometimes we think about what I can do to make a difference without thinking about the people below us. If we can inspire the people below us and allow them to have some rope and accountability, hold, and that comes with KPIs and metrics and so forth. But that's really important. That then follows on with the leadership challenge, which is you need to be able to lead people to do that. And I think for too long, and I think it's
Mhm.
starting to change, but I think for too long, a lot of the leadership courses out there were very focused on leadership processes and um, how to lead and various topics in that space. But we never spend enough time on the behavioral elements of leadership. We don't spend enough time on the power of interpersonal connection. Uh,
Exactly.
and I used to run a course at General Motors. Used to run it with community groups as well about um, how do you create the right first impression, and why should you handshake every employee or everyone you meet? And I'll give you this as a little snippet. They've done a lot of research that shows one handshake builds more rapport than up to 3 hours of continuous interaction.
Mhm.
So if that is true, which the research shows, why aren't we handshaking and building rapport with people straight away? And it's just little lessons like this we can teach our leaders that can make a big difference with their workers. When you rock up to work every day, smile, release oxytocin to your brain, and because you're smiling and they've got mirror neurons in their brain, they're going to smile back,
Mhm.
which releases oxytocin in their brain. Make people feel good by smiling. These are the types of lessons that we aren't teaching our leaders, and I think there's a lot we can do in this space to make a big difference in our culture. And then finally, I think it's pretty obvious the rapid technological challenges. AI is
Mhm.
changing the world. If you don't think it is, then you need to maybe go and do some homework on Google. Um, we see it in our industry all the time. People are no longer writing articles; they're using ChatGPT. They're doing photos and videos with AI. It's really, and we're only at the start of it. So um, companies are now starting to think about what that means for their 5-year plan and strategic plans, and are going, what do we need to do to stay relevant as an organization?
Mhm. Yeah, I really appreciate how you've actually like summarized all these important leadership problems that a lot of organizations do face, right? And again, it has to be, when you say recruiting people, it's really like finding the right people in the right place at the right time, right?
Absolutely. Hey, look, I work for a recruitment and staffing firm, and I think we're the best one on the planet. But as good as we are, we still have to work well with the organisations that we work with, because sometimes we might do all the great recruitment stuff up front, and then we
Mm-hmm.
hand them over, and that's when it falls over.
Mm-hmm.
So it is both the recruit side and the retain piece.
Exactly, because I mean, sometimes you get to find the right people at the right time. uh, right, but then again, like sometimes, like how do you make them stay? And that's goes back to what you've mentioned earlier around really building the culture of the organization, right? And making them feel that they belong and they're part of a bigger picture, a bigger like thing that they have to put in together, right? So, and that really requires leadership, which is the usual problem that most organization also face. And again, now with everything like you've mentioned around chat gpt, and I mean, you're in the US, I'm in Manila, in the Philippines right now, and we're here together, right? So that's make it really amazing, and how like the technology can actually make the world a little bit smaller for every one of us, right? And but then again, that means we have to keep up as well. So thank you for identifying all those problems and partly actually sharing like how we can address that, which is my next question to you. uh, on like what actually are the important leadership capabilities that you, or skills that you must have in the next normal, or whatever they want to call it, to continue to lead more effectively. And earlier you've shared some stories. For sure you can uh, share with us more experiences or perhaps
Yeah.
stories on how you can relate to it and what do you mean by that, right? But before you answer my question, I just want to say hi and thank you to Jay Ramirez for giving us a like. Thank you for joining us. If you have any questions, again, any like takeaways, feel free to type it in on the comments. So go ahead with with your answer.
Not a problem, not a problem. So, I think there's a number of areas that I think was really important in leadership, and there's a number of individual skill sets that I think a leader needs to have. And again, when we recruit a leader,
Mhm.
and you see this a lot at that director level and C-suite level, you know, we're automatically going, do they have project management skills? Right? What is their experience? What's their technical knowledge? And we get really involved in the role and what's required of that role, and they're going to lead people, so they must know how to run projects and they must know how to schedule this and do that. But we don't often spend enough time on that behavioral element. And so when you talk about, well, what is that behavioral element, or what is those skill sets are you talking about? First of all, there's things like integrity. Fairly important one for a leader, but it surprises me. Um, I used to run a consulting firm before I joined my
Mhm.
current organization. And
Mhm.
in that consulting firm, I worked with so many different industries and so many different companies, and there were some good ones out there. But at the same time, I met a lot of leaders that didn't have the level of integrity that I think is really important as a leader. And that comes along with your word being your word. It comes along with making sure that you build, when you talk to your workforce and saying, here's what your career plan looks like, or here's what I think your runway looks like, and then the minute you don't follow that, the employee will challenge your integrity. Now, it may not be your fault. So um, that's where integrity has to be also followed up by having realistic conversations, and that is another skill set. um, and sometimes we can be too quick to go promise the world, or not promise the world,
Mhm.
and that then leads to the employee going, well, you're not very, you lied to me because you said this and this. Well, that challenges your integrity, but that also aligns with that piece as well. And then you start going in and going, okay, well, what other skill sets are there? And I think there's some really important ones, and humility being one of those. Um,
Mhm.
and I think if you're going to build psychological safety in your team, which is so important, Google did a project a number of years ago called Project Aristotle. And what they did was they researched all around the world what were the attributes that made a team successful.
Mhm.
And when they did that, what they found was there's all these obvious things, but it wasn't the makeup of the team and whether you had people that liked each other or didn't like each other, or introverts or extroverts or anything like that. What really made the difference was if the team had psychological safety.
True.
It was the number one correlate. And what to create that, it needed a number of things. It
Mhm.
needed good listening, ostentatious listening, I think they called it. Being able to, as a leader, to actually put your phone away and
Mhm.
actually look people in the eye when they talk. um, Really hard in the current, and not even just put it away. The minute you're holding your phone and talking to someone, their thought subconsciously is going, are they listening to me, or are they interested in their phone? You may actually be listening. So there's this piece around that, and that then follows through with other aspects like uh, equal turn taking when they talk. So
Mhm.
when you run a meeting, try and let everyone have a similar amount of time to talk. It basically makes people feel like that they're engaged in the process because they've had an element of talking. And then there's the piece of humility that I mentioned. Um,
Mhm.
there's moments when you actually have to be real and show humility. Don't boast. Don't go and tell the world that what your team did was actually what you did. Be humble, share the word, share the love, but at the
Mhm.
same time, show humility to your team. And sometimes a little bit of vulnerability doesn't hurt either. We used to run a session in my HR team meetings where I would, and I actually want to reintroduce this, um, but we used to talk about not just the positives of the week, but the challenges we had. And that's really important. As a leader, I think sometimes I go, you know what? One of the challenges I had this week was this. And either I would tell them how I got around it and what I'm going to do in the future, which shows correction and moving forward. Or if I was still working through that challenge, I would ask my team, do you have any suggestions about how I could get through this? And now they're involved in my challenge, they feel empowered because I'm asking them to support me on my journey. And it's actually really powerful. So there's just a handful of skill sets, and that's just on the interpersonal skill set. I didn't even talk. I talked about the smiling and the handshakes and all of that before, but I think there's some other elements that we need to consider too, and that includes um, managing data. And
Mm-hmm.
I think in the world that we're heading in now, it is changing. There's a lot of science around, or a lot of research now around what the impact of technology and AI. What that Some of those human elements are going to be super important, but so is the ability to understand data and work with technology. And I think it's actually going to be a much stronger skill set that's required in the future. And we're not quite there yet, but I think there will be a need for that. And then finally, I think a capability or skill set that I'll throw in there is all about how to lead remote workers. Um, it pretty much half the world is working remotely now in one form or another, or partly remotely. And I don't think we've quite got the people element down yet. And I know there is some things to be said about remote work, and there's some benefits to it, but at the same time, how do you truly build that relationship, that culture, that trust, that integrity, when we are humans who were built for connection and touch and personal relationships? And I think
Mm-hmm.
that is definitely a skill set that leaders need to work on. Is how do I engage and build and encourage and build trust? How do I train and educate? How do I also hold them to account? Because it's very easy to hide behind a screen. So it's not all fluffy stuff either. There's accountability in that. And maybe just to finish on that accountability word, we used to have a saying at General Motors, trust and verify. And that was a leadership principle we brought in, that as we build people, give them extra skill sets, help them grow, we used to, as a leadership team, not delegate so much because we didn't always have the trust. We all of a sudden learned, no, we're going to trust our employees. We're going to coach them and build them. And then we're going to have a check-in point every now and then where we verify that they're on the right path. And I think that's a really important part. It's the trust has to go with verify. So there's just a handful of skill sets, and I can add 1,000 more, like humor. I'm still working on this, and Bless knows me. She'll tell you I'm still working on my humor. But humor is a very powerful ally for a leader, and it can show different elements of humility and vulnerability and so forth. But at the same time, who doesn't want to laugh? It builds oxytocin in your mind, and it makes work more enjoyable.
Thank you. That's a lot of skills that you have shared. Thank you so much. And just wanted to say, read Bless Comment Project Aristotle. I'm not sure. I think this is part of what you have
Yes.
shared earlier. And I really love that you've shared a lot of these are very interpersonal and behavioral based kind of like skills and capabilities a leader must have. And it's interesting because when I started, I actually have done a lot of technical niche program in the oil and gas industry. And even so, I've been actually running programs around financial modeling, data analytics, which are some of the top programs that we run. But at the same time, I always, again, I have been doing this interviews for free for the last almost 2.5 years, I would say. In the last probably almost 150 interviews as well. And the reason why I'm doing this is because yes, we provide technical programs, but at the same time, I wanted like more leaders to realize how important um, behavioral and attitude, all these soft skills that we are talking about. And sometimes, we forget to like train people. It's not as easy as technical program, yes, but again, it's possible, right? It's possible to train people on how can you actually hone your leadership skills, how can you improve the how you build trust with your team so that you can build your relationships with them. And it's interesting you mentioned about humor. It's the first time, I guess it's the first time that I heard about like building humor as well. That's very interesting. But yeah, it's a reality. People likes to connect, people likes to laugh, and that's making like I guess the organization or your environment to be lighter than anything else, right? Because sometimes we take ourselves too seriously,
Yeah,
and it's it that's not what we want, right? Most of the time
absolutely.
we wanted a balance of like having that humor, enjoying what we are spending a lot of times at work, right? So imagine if you're just all serious doing work, it's not going to be fun and it's not going to be sustainable as well, right? So I really appreciate that you've mentioned around this integrity, humility, building psychological safety. And again, it's about like the basics of how human connects, right? if,
Yeah,
if I want if I can put it into like a shorter version, right? Summarizing all the amazing skills, important skills that you've shared with us. It's really so much around like how can we stay human in our
absolutely.
organization, right? So
It's
I really love it.
it's interesting just to add to that. Actually, I used to run a course called Being Human, and that
Wow.
was part of the first part of leadership in my eyes, because until you realize that component of being human, and not just for yourself but for others around you, it's really you won't see leadership the same otherwise. And maybe just a slight example just on that topic.
Mm-hmm.
um, I have worked with leaders, and
Mm-hmm.
I've unfortunately in many places in my career where you have a poor performer. Now the immediate reaction is they're a poor performer, let's get them out, right? It's the immediate reaction. But often, if we're honest with ourselves and dig deeper into the culture and how we've led that individual, there may be a number of reasons that relate to this behavioral element that we've contributed to. So I think if we get that human element right, um, give people a chance to perform under good leadership and see what happens. And I've got dozens of examples of poor performers that have turned because we've led them well, versus people that have deteriorated because we've started leading them poorly. So um, it's just an important part of that characteristic and skill set that we need.
Yeah, that's really an important reminder for everyone. And again, that goes back to the basics, right? Maslow,
Yeah.
the Maslow pyramid, right?
Well,
It's really the
we had employees, that would, I had a leader come up to me one day saying, "I want to get rid of this person," when I was at General Motors, and and I said, "Do you believe in your heart that this person woke up this morning, turned his clock off, and said, 'I'm going to be an absolute idiot today'? Or do you think that maybe there's another factor that we haven't considered?" Because I don't believe people want to be bad. I think some people are lazy. Don't get me wrong. Some people do the wrong thing. Don't get me wrong. But I
there's
don't.
more, I guess. There's more people that are lazy. I mean, it's easier to be lazy after all.
But think about it. If they're lazy because they're not inspired in their job, or they're in the wrong job, let's help them get the right job. That may not be with you,
Mhm,
but so it's, again, just look at the human element first. If you consider everything from people's eyes, you'll make
mhm,
different decisions. It may still be the same decision, but you'll think
mhm.
about it differently.
Yeah, very true. Thank you so much for all these amazing reminders that you have shared with us. I really, really appreciate all of this, and it's a great reminder. I'm actually personally taking notes from this conversation, so I really appreciate all these answers that you've shared, and just nice because next week, once I'm back in Singapore, I'll be doing a program. I'll be lecturing tertiary students around leadership and team effectiveness, and I'm just glad I've learned from you today.
That's
to
awesome.
to be able to make use of those, right?
Now you can get good.
Thank you. For sure. Thank you. And I've learned from get good after all. So that leads me to my last question. If you have a magic wand and can use it, what will you do with it?
Yeah, I thought long and hard about this, and I think it's a twofold approach. I would want everyone on this planet to live godly values because
Mm-hmm.
I think if everyone lived godly values, we'd live in a different world. But also, and probably this is the one that's more relevant to what we're talking about today. Um, I'd like people to see themselves based on how they were created to be. Like I truly believe that everyone was born for a purpose, has
Mm-hmm.
amazing skill sets, and can actually make a difference in their world. They just got to believe it. And once they have that belief, then they'll take actions and activities and they'll work and they'll do all these different things in their life to make a difference in their world because they believe who they really are. And I think as leaders, if we harness that belief or encourage people to see their skill sets, because sometimes people don't see their good traits, sometimes
Mm-hmm.
people don't see the value that they add. Let's help people see that. Show people that they were created for a purpose and they are special, they are loved, they do make a difference in this world. And I think if everyone took this approach and we could flick a magic wand and everyone had that belief, again, that would create that world that we want.
Wow, that's really amazing. I really hope you have a magic wand. I just bought one for my child for the
We're still
Halloween.
working on that one.
But but I mean, even without the magic wand, with the work that you do, and even with this conversation alone, like less than 1 hour, like how much I got from you and how much important reminders that you have shared with us. So thank you. Without even without that magic wand, with the work that you do, I believe that you've been like doing everything that you could, and leveraging on your talents to be able to help others to see um, like how what are they made of. And it's really interesting because i i I have seen this tool. It's called Gene Keys. I'm not sure if you've heard of them. Gene Keys, and it actually shares like the purpose of each and every one of us. So it's really an amazing tool. They have free profiling, and even the investment for their programs are really like, wow, is this real? it's 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 a very small investment for the type of the quality that they bring in to the table. And what's amazing about that is they have like a well combination of, or it's an integration of spiritual scientific studies. So like, wow, interesting. So if you haven't heard of it, just
No, I need to look it up.
look in look into that. So anyway, thank you so much for taking time to have this conversation with me. I really appreciate all the reminders that you have shared. I have took a lot of notes, and also like I've learned so much from you today, and I would believe that this is an amazing reminder for everyone, because if anything, like what you've said, we can create the world that we wanted to live in, right? So before we end this conversation, is there anything more that you'd like to leave our audience with?
Look, what I will add is probably my favorite quote, which aligns all of this together in one sentence. Um, it's by an American poet called Maya Angelou, and you've probably heard it before. It's pretty famous, but um, it's basically people will never remember what you said. They'll never
Mhm.
remember what you did, but they'll always remember how you made them feel. And I think that's a really powerful lesson for us to learn. And unfortunately, when we closed the automotive industry in Australia, that was my principle, that I wanted people to remember how we made them feel on that journey and help them
Mhm.
believe in themselves. And guess what? We had incredible results, and
Mhm.
people still today thank me for the efforts that we did. And so I think that's a lesson for everyone. Doesn't matter what you say or do, how you make people feel will make a difference.
Mhm. Wow, thank you. That's wonderful. A great reminder to leave our audience with. And I mean, I have attended a coaching program before, and they actually talk about this, and it's interesting that um, like most people actually voted for like the part of emotional intelligence, and like how they remember or they get angry most because of the what the leaders made them feel, and nothing about the technical expertise, and nothing about like the work itself, but it's really how they made them the people around them feel, right? So thank you so much for that reminder. And I really appreciate that this is your last message as well. A very wonderful reminder for everyone. So thank you again, Jamie, and thank you again, Bless, for connecting me to Jamie. And thank you to our audience who are watching us live. And we look forward to like collaborating probably in the future, hopefully in the near future, and find out how we can help organizations and leaders to bring their organizations to the next level by creating psychological safety and a wonderful place to live in, right? So with that, I'd like to invite everyone us, connect with us, and let us know how we can support you, especially around the space of learning and leadership. And I would like to leave everyone with this quote that if your actions create a legacy that inspires others to dream more, learn more, do more, and become more, then you are an excellent leader. Thank you so much for being an excellent leader for us, especially today, Jamie.
Not a
So
problem.
thank you so much, everyone. Thank you, Jamie, and bye for now. See
Thank
you again.
you. Bye.